Maryland House Majority Leader David Moon sat before the House Ways and Means Committee and explained to his fellow delegates that his legislative offering calling for a tax on business services was one of desperation. Desperation in the face of a seemingly insurmountable budget deficit that the General Assembly is facing. Delegate Moon was extremely candid when he said that he knew it wasn't a perfect bill or a solution, but he felt that he had to offer something to address the fiscal nightmare on the horizon, recalling the fact that he introduced the same legislation a year ago. It was shot down, and he hadn't originally intended on bringing it back up in this session. 5 hours later, after hundreds of individual Marylanders, business owners, and industry representatives testified that a tax on business services would drive many out of the business, would be reluctantly passed on to Maryland consumers, and many declared that they would move, if the bill was enacted, to neighboring and more friendly jurisdictions. The committee hearing ended. I was in the committee room, and the gloom set over the committee room. Nancy, Governor Moore and the General Assembly have proposed higher taxes on top earners, closing corporate loopholes, a highway use fee for electric vehicles, increased taxes on goods and services, lowering the estate tax exemption. At what point will Marylanders push back on this?
Well, these are acts of desperation. No question about it. I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to have to make some serious cuts somewhere. And I'm sure they're worrying about that right now. What is it going to do to education? That's probably a huge issue for them all. And how are they going to manage other kinds of commitments? I don't see any easy way out for them. And I understand why they're asking all their analysts, what can we do? What can we do? What could we do that will hurt the people the least? I don't know, what would you do?
Well, here's the conundrum, and is that the House of Delegates, passed the education budget without the cuts that even the modest cuts that the governor was requesting. Mark, what if the House of Delegates doesn't take it seriously? What's going to happen?
Well, I was going to make it precisely that point, which is that the governor made proposals, frankly, very modest reductions in the blueprint, and even those were not adopted by the legislature. This is a problem of their own making. I mean, they can wring their hands about tough choices and how difficult it is for them, but this is a problem that they created that other states aren't facing because they haven't done what Maryland has done. Because of the legislatures being so beholden to the teachers union in continuing to push forward with the blueprint, Maryland is going into a fiscal doom loop, a doom loop which is driving business away from the state, is driving high earners away from the state, and will continue to create financial problems for the state, not just this year, but well into the future when the revenues that are anticipated don't produce the results, or the capital gains from the stock market don't produce the results that high earners provide. And it really is a catastrophe that is of the General Assembly's making.
Well, it's a very difficult thing. Nancy?
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think they have all the numbers yet either. I mean, what was it? Hopkins is laying off 1,000 people or more because of the reduction in federal grants. What is that going to mean across the state? They're talking about cuts to defense. Additional hits aren't factored in yet because nobody still knows what's going to come out of the federal budget cuts. So they have no room for maneuver, that's for sure. And I'm sure their information is not. They can't predict what's going to happen today and tomorrow, but I'm sure by the time they pass the budget, they're still not going to know what the ultimate hits in employment are across the state of Maryland. And, we can never be sure, but now we'll see.
That's the question. What happens if we reach, the end of the General Assembly and they haven't balanced the budget?
Well, they're going to have
Because
to do
that's what
something.
it has to be by the end of the legislative session, correct?
I mean, they could call a special session or something. It's not going to fix the problem. It's probably only going to get worse. It's a very, very, very difficult time for them. And the unpredictability and chaos of the marketplace is another problem. They got retirement funds. They've got all kinds of funds invested that they are going to have to worry about the returns on as well. They have fixed obligations that they don't have. That there's not a lot of room for maneuvering here. So it's going to be a nightmare. I always used to say the good thing about here, this area, is that it was a company town, and the company isn't going anywhere. And that was that we were the home to so many federal facilities. But apparently, that just goes to show you never assume anything. That's no longer the case. They're making the company smaller, reducing jobs, and we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that and focus on I'm not disagreeing with you folks about the business side of things, which is something, frankly, that this region hasn't had to do so much because we had a big company here.
Well, we had some
So,
stability. We had
we'll see.
stability and a backstop. Mark,
Yeah.
Well, one of my observations was going to be that David Moon has, I think, learned from Donald Trump in his ability to engage in distraction. He's done this over a period of times of proposing a variety of tax increases that kind of grab a lot of attention. I remember he did that last year. And it kind of has a way of, how shall I say, spreading the opposition across the board, and it becomes a kind of distraction to, I think, ultimately what will be the a tax package that the General Assembly passes.
well, I will say that I sat through that 5 hours of those hearings. There were all walks of life that presented their opposition to a tax on business services. But at the same time, if Delegate Moon is correct, he estimates that it'll be about $1.2 billion in revenue that will come in from such a tax. And as the lobbyists that my trade association, the Maryland Land Title Association, works with, said this bill has legs because of the financial uncertainty that the legislature is in. So there could be some kind of, the hotel people, oh my gosh, the hotel people were just, sickened by the thought. My industry gets affected because everything we do is subcontracted out to a contractor, whether it's an abstractor, a surveyor, somebody. There'll be an additional fee added on, and that just gets layered on back to the general public when they do a transaction. So it's an intractable problem. And Nancy, everybody, we all three agree this is a big issue.